Hello. You may notice that everything is yellow tinted. Don't worry about that. I just recently went to the Zack Snyder School of Film and learned that yellow means good and happy. So everything is yellow now. I just wanted to thank any viewers. Just before watching this video, we don't have a sponsor for this video. As per usual, there are no sponsors for this channel. It's all self-funded. I do it myself. I don't have any help from anyone. It's just me. But it's funded by people like Takado Takasui. He is the he is the only member, and I'm very grateful for him. So, Takado, uh, I love the book We. I hope you enjoy this 10 chapter compilation. I can't wait to finish it and talk to anyone who actually listens to this. That's it. Thanks.
We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. Translated by Gregory Zilborg. Forward. In submitting this book to the American public, the translator has this to say. The artistic and psychological sides of the novel are hardly to be discussed in a preface. Great as the art of a writer may be, and profound as his psychology may seem to one, the impression is largely a matter of individual variations, and this side must naturally be left to each individual's judgment and sensibilities. There is, however, one side of the matter which deserves particular mention and motivated emphasis. It is perhaps for the first time in the history of the last few decades that a Russian book inspired by Russian life, written in Russia and in the Russian language, should see its first light not in Russia but abroad, and not in the language it was originally written but translated into a foreign tongue. During the darkest years of Russian history in the 40s, 60s, 80s, and 90s of the last century, many Russian writers were forced by oppression and reaction to live abroad and to write abroad, yet their writings would reach Russia as they were intended primarily for the Russian reader and Russian life. Most of Turgenev's novels were written while he was in France, and with the exception of his last story, which he dictated on his deathbed, all his novels and stories were written in Russian. Herzen, Kropotkin, and at one time Dostoevsky were similarly obliged to write while away from their native land. Here is a book written by an artist who lived and still lives in Russia, and whose intimate love for Russia and her suffering is so great that he finds it impossible to leave Russia, even in these days of stress and sorrow. But his book may not appear in the country where it was written. It is a great tragedy, this spiritual loneliness of the artist who cannot speak to his own people. In bringing out this book in English, the author tries to address himself to the world without having the opportunity of being heard by his own people. This situation, however, is to a great extent symbolic of the spiritual mission of Samyatin, for no matter what the language in which he originally writes, and no matter how typically national his artistic perception and intuition, he is essentially universal, and his vision transcends the boundaries of a purely national art. Moreover, is it not true that the more genuinely national a man's art, and the more sincerely national his personality, the more is he universal? Abraham Lincoln is more than an American national figure, and I doubt if the appeal Lincoln's personality makes would be universal as it is if he were not so typically American. It is difficult to find personalities more national than Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, And this is perhaps the reason why they stand out as two of the most typically universal minds, with a universal appeal that the 19th century gave us. Zamyatin is not so great as the men referred to above, but despite his youth, he already proves to be the bearer of that quality of greatness which characterizes a personality with a universal appeal. We is, as Zamyatin himself calls it, the most jocular and the most earnest thing he has thus far written. It is a novel that puts most poignantly and earnestly before every thoughtful reader the most difficult problem that exists today in the civilized world. The problem of preservation of the independent, original, creative personality. Our civilization today depends upon the energetic movement of great masses of people. Wars, revolutions, general strikes, all these phenomena involve great masses, large groups, enormous mobs. Despite the fact that there is hardly a corner in the world today where the average man does not make the trite complaint, "What we need is leadership." The world today seems, for a time at least, to have lost its capacity for producing real leaders. For our great successes in mechanical civilization, our exceptional efforts in efficiency, tend to bring into play large numbers rather than great individualities. What, under these conditions, is the lot of a creative individuality? What the tragedy of an independent spirit under present conditions is pointed out in a unique way in We. The problem of creative individuality versus mob is today not a mere Russian problem. It is as poignant under Bolshevist dictatorship as it is in Ford's factory. Of course, the sincere, honest, and frank treatment of this problem seems offensive to anyone who prefers to be a member of a mob or keep this or that part of humanity in the state of a mob. That is why we could not see light in Russia, and will probably be disliked by those whose spiritual activities are reduced to the mechanical standards of a mechanical civilization which is devoid of original creative effort. A few words about the method by which Zamyatin tries to drive home to the reader his main ideas. It is the method of laughter through tears, to use an old expression of Gogol. It is the form which is dictated by profound love for humanity, mixed with pity and hatred of those factors which are the cause of the disindividualization of man today. It is the old emotion of the ancient cattle, odi et amo. Zamyatin laughs in order to hide his tears, hence amusing as We may seem and really is. It barely conceals a profound human tragedy which is universal today. The reader may be interested in knowing something about Zamyatin himself. Zamyatin does not like to tell about himself, and the translator does not think he has the right to tell more than to quote Zamyatin's own answer to a request addressed to him a couple of years ago to write his autobiography. I see you want my autobiography by all means, but I assure you that you will have to limit yourself only to an outside inspection and get but a glimpse, perhaps, into the dark windows. I seldom ask anybody to enter. As to the outside, you will see a lonely child without playmates, lying on a Turkish divan, hindside up, reading a book, or under the grand piano while his mother plays Chopin. 2 steps away from Chopin, just outside the window with the geraniums, in the middle of the street, there is a small pig tied to a stake and hens fluttering in the dust. If you are interested in the geography, here it is. Lebedin, in the most Russian Tambov province, about which Tolstoy and Turgenev wrote so much. Chronology: the end of the 80s and early 90s, then Voronezh, the gymnasium pension, boredom, and rabid dogs on the main street. One of these dogs got me by the leg. At that time, I loved to make different experiments on myself, and I decided to wait and see whether I would or would not get the rabies, and what is most important, I was very curious. What would I feel when the time would come for the rabies? About 2 weeks after the bite. I felt a great many things, but 2 weeks later I did not get the rabies. Therefore, I announced to the inspector in the school that I got the rabies and must go at once to Moscow for vaccination. In the gymnasium, I would get A+ for composition and was not always on good terms with mathematics. Perhaps because of that sheer stubbornness, I chose the most mathematical career, the shipbuilding department of the Petrograd Polytech. 13 years ago in the month of May, and that May was remarkable in that the snow covered the flowers, I simultaneously finished my work for my diploma and my first short story. The short story was published in the old Obrazovanie. Well, what else do you want? That meant I was going to write short stories and was going to publish them. Therefore, for the following 3 years, I wrote about nothing but ice cutters, steam engines, refillers, and the theoretical exploration of the works of floating steam shovels. I couldn't help myself. I was attached to the chair of ship architecture and busied myself with teaching in the shipbuilding faculty, where I teach now. If I mean anything in Russian literature, I owe this completely to the Petrograd Secret Service. In 1911, this service exiled me from Petrograd, and I was forced to spend 2 years in a non-populated place in Lakhta. There, in the midst of the white winter silence and the green summer silence, I wrote my provincial. After that, the late Ismailov expressed in print his belief that I wore very high boots and was a long-haired provincial type, carrying a heavy stick, and he was later very much surprised that I didn't look a bit like that. Incidentally, not a bit like that, I became in England, where, during the war, I spent about 2 years, building ships and visiting the ruins of ancient castles. I listened to the banging of the German Zeppelin bombs and wrote a short novel, The Islanders. I regret immensely that I did not witness the Russian Revolution in February, and know only the October Revolution, because it was in October, a life preserver around my body and all the lights out, passing German submarines, that I returned to Petrograd. Because of this, I felt like one who, never having been in love, gets up one morning and finds himself married about 10 years. Now I write little, perhaps because my requirements towards myself become greater. 3 new volumes are in the hands of the publisher and begin to be published only now. The 4th will be my novel, We, the funniest and most earnest thing I have written. However, the most serious and most interesting novels I never wrote. They happened to me in my life. Zamyatin continues to live in Russia and continues to live with Russia, but such is the sarcasm of fate that the first Russian novel giving a real synthesis of the Russian Revolution and its greater universal meaning, this novel written by Zamyatin, should remain unknown to Russians in Russia. Gregory Zilborg, New York, 1924. We. Record 1. An announcement. The wisest of lines. A poem. This is merely a copy, word by word, of what was published this morning in the state newspaper. In another 120 days, the building of the integral will be completed. The great historic hour is near, when the first integral will rise into the limitless space of the universe. 1,000 years ago, your heroic ancestors subjected the whole earth to the power of the United States. A still more glorious task is before you: the integration of the indefinite equation of the cosmos by the use of the glass, electric, fire-breathing integral. Your mission is to subjugate to the grateful yoke of reason the unknown beings who live on other planets, and who are perhaps still in the primitive state of freedom. If they will not understand that we are bringing them a mathematically faultless happiness, our duty will be to force them to be happy. But before we take up arms, we shall try the power of words. In the name of the well-doer, the following is announced herewith to all numbers of the United States. Whoever feels capable must consider it his duty to write treatises, poems, manifestos, odes, and other compositions on the greatness and the beauty of the United States. This will be the first load which the integral will carry. Long live the United States! Long live the numbers! Long live the well-doer! I feel my cheeks are burning as I write this. To integrate with the colossal universal equation, to unbend the wild curve, to straighten it out to a tangent, to a straight line. For the United States is a straight line, a great, divine, precise, wise line, the wisest of lines. I, D503, the builder of the integral, I am only one of the many mathematicians of the United States. My pen, which is accustomed to figures, is unable to express the march and rhythm of consonants. Therefore, I shall try to record only the things I see, the things I think, or, to be more exact, the things we think. Yes, we. That is exactly what I mean, and we shall therefore be the title of my records. But this will only be a derivative of our life, of our mathematical, perfect life in the United States. If this be so, will not this derivative be a poem in itself, despite my limitations? It will. I believe. I know it. I feel my cheeks are burning as I write this. I feel something similar to what a woman probably feels when, for the first time, she senses within herself the pulse of a tiny, blind human being. It is I, and at the same time it is not I. And for many long months it will be necessary to feed it with my life, with my blood, and then, with a pain at my heart, to tear it from myself and lay it bare at the feet of the United States. Yet I am ready, as everyone, or nearly every one of us, is. I am ready. Record 2. Ballet, Square Harmony, X. Spring. From behind the green wall, from some unknown plains, the wind brings to us the yellow honeyed pollen of flowers. One's lips are dry from this sweet dust. Every moment one passes one's tongue over them. Probably all women whom I meet in the street, and men certainly also, have today sweet lips. This disturbs somewhat my logical thinking. But the sky is blue. Its limpidness is not marred by a single cloud. How primitive was the taste of the ancients, since their poets were always inspired by these senseless, formless, stupidly rushing accumulations of steam. I love. I am sure it will not be an error if I say we love. Only such a sky. A sterile, faultless sky. On such days, the whole universe seems to be molded of the same eternal glass, like the green wall, and like all our buildings. On such days, one sees into the very blue depth of things. One sees their wonderful equations, hitherto unknown. One sees them in everything, even in the most ordinary, everyday things. Here is an example. This morning I was on the dock where the integral is being built, and I saw the lathes, blindly, with abandon. The balls of the regulators were rotating. The cranks were swinging from side to side with a glimmer. The working beam proudly swung its shoulder, and the mechanical chisels were dancing to the melody of an unheard tarantella. I suddenly perceived all the music, all the beauty of this colossal, of this mechanical ballet, illumined by light blue rays of sunshine. Then the thought came, why beautiful? Why is a dance beautiful? Answer, because it is an unfree movement. Because the deep meaning of the dance is contained in its absolute ecstatic submission, in the ideal non-freedom. If it is true that our ancestors would abandon themselves in dancing at the most inspired moments of their lives, religious mysteries, military parades, then it means only one thing. The instinct of non-freedom has been characteristic of human nature from ancient times, and we, in our life of today, we are only consciously. I was interrupted. The switchboard clicked. I raised my eyes. 090, of course. In half a minute she herself will be here to take me for the walk. Dear O. She always seems to me to look like her name, O. She is approximately 10 centimeters shorter than the required maternal norm. Therefore she appears all round. The rose-colored O of her lips is open to meet every word of mine. She has a round, soft dimple on her wrist. Children have such dimples. As she came in, the logical flywheel was still buzzing in my head, and following its inertia, I began to tell her about my new formula which embraced the machines and the dancers and all of us. Wonderful, isn't it? I asked. Yes, wonderful. Spring, she replied with a rosy smile. You see? Spring! She talks about spring! Females! I became silent. We were down in the street. The avenue was crowded. On days when the weather is so beautiful, the afternoon personal hour is usually the hour of the supplementary walk. As always, the big musical tower was playing with all its pipes, the March of the United States. The numbers, hundreds, thousands of numbers in light blue unifs, probably a derivative of the ancient uniform, with golden badges on the chest, the state number of each one, male or female. The numbers were walking slowly, 4 abreast, exaltedly keeping the step. We 4, were but one of the innumerable waves of a powerful torrent. To my left, 090. If one of my long-haired ancestors were writing this 1,000 years ago, he would probably call her by that funny word, mine. To my right, 2 unknown numbers, a she number and a he number. Blue sky, tiny baby suns in each one of our badges. Our faces are unclouded by the insanity of thoughts. Rays, do you picture it? Everything seems to be made of a kind of smiling, a ray-like matter. In the brass measures, tra-ta-ta-tam, tra-ta-ta-tam, stamping on the brassy steps which sparkle in the sun. With every step you rise higher and higher into the dizzy blue heights. Then, as this morning on the dock, again I saw, as if for the first time in my life, The impeccably straight streets, the glistening glass of the pavement, the divine parallelepipeds of the transparent dwellings, the square harmony of the grayish-blue rows of numbers. And it seemed to me that not past generations, but I myself had won a victory over the old God and the old life, that I myself had created all this. I felt like a tower. I was afraid to move my elbow, lest the walls, the cupola, and the machine should fall to pieces. Then, without warning, a jump through centuries. I remembered, apparently through an association by contrast, a picture in the museum, a picture of an avenue of the 20th century, a thundering, many-colored confusion of men, wheels, animals, billboards, trees, colors, and birds. They say all this once actually existed. It seemed to me so incredible, so absurd, that I lost control of myself and laughed aloud. A laugh, as if an echo of mine reached my ear from the right. I turned. I saw white, very white, sharp teeth, and an unfamiliar female face. "I beg your pardon," she said, "but you looked about you like an inspired mythological god on the seventh day of creation. You look as though you are sure that I, too, was created by you, by no one but you. It is very flattering." All this without a smile, even with a certain degree of respect. She may know that I am the builder of the integral. In her eyes, nevertheless, in her brows, there was a strange, irritating X, and I was unable to grasp it, to find an arithmetical expression for it. Somehow I was confused. With a somewhat hazy mind, I tried logically to motivate my laughter. It was absolutely clear that this contrast, this impassable abyss, between the things of today and of years ago. But why impassable? What bright, sharp teeth! One might throw a bridge over that abyss. Please imagine, a drum battalion, rows, all this existed before, and consequently— "Oh yes, it is clear!" I exclaimed. It was a remarkable intersection of thoughts. She said almost in the same words the things I wrote down before the walk. Do you understand? Even the thoughts! It is because nobody is one, but one of. We are all so much alike. Are you sure? I noticed her brows, which rose to the temples in an acute angle, like the sharp corners of an X. Again, I was confused, casting a glance to the right, then to the left. To my right, she, slender, abrupt, resistantly flexible like a whip, I-330. I saw her number now. To my left, O, totally different, made all of circles, with a childlike dimple on her wrist, and at the very end of our row, an unknown he number, double-curved like the letter S. We were all so different from one another. The one to my right, I-330, apparently caught my confused eye, for she said with a sigh, "Yes, alas." I don't deny that this exclamation was quite in place, but again, there was something in her face, or in her voice. With an abruptness unusual for me, I said, "Why, alas? Science is developing, and if not now, then within 50 or 100 years, even the noses will— Yes, noses!" This time I almost shouted. Since there is still a reason, no matter what, for envy, since my nose is button-like, and someone else's is— Well, your nose is rather classic, as they would say in the ancient days, although your hands— No, show me your hands. I hate to have anyone look at my hands. They are covered with long hair, a stupid atavism. I stretched out my hand and said as indifferently as I could, ape-like. She glanced at my hand, then at my face. No, a very curious harmony. She weighed me with her eyes as though with scales. The little horns again appeared at the corners of her brows. He is registered in my name, exclaimed 090 with a rosy smile. I made a grimace. Strictly speaking, she was out of order. This dear O, how shall I say it? The speed of her tongue is not correctly calculated. The speed per second of her tongue should be slightly less than the speed per second of her thoughts, at any rate not the reverse. At the end of the avenue, the big bell of the accumulating tower resounded 17. The personal hour was at an end. I-330 was leaving us with that S-like key number. He was such a respectable, and I noticed then, such a familiar face. I must have met him somewhere, but where I could not remember. Upon leaving me, I-330 said with the same X-like smile, "Drop in day after tomorrow at Auditorium 112. I shrugged my shoulders. If I am assigned to the auditorium you just named, she, with a peculiar, incomprehensible certainty, you will. The woman had upon me a disagreeable effect, like an irrational component of an equation which you cannot eliminate. I was glad to remain alone with dear O, at least for a short while. Hand in hand with her, I passed 4 lines of avenues. At the next corner she went to the right, I to the left. O timidly raised her round, blue, crystalline eyes. I would like so much to come to you today and pull down the curtains, especially today, right now. How funny she is. But what could I say to her? She was with me only yesterday, and she knows as well as I that our next sexual day is day after tomorrow. It is merely another case in which her thoughts are too far ahead. It sometimes happens that the spark comes too early to the motor. At parting, I kissed her twice. No, I shall be exact. 3 times on her wonderful blue eyes. Such clear, unclouded eyes. Ugh. Great. Record 3. A coat, a wall, the tables. I looked over all that I wrote down yesterday, and I find that my descriptions are not sufficiently clear. That is, everything would undoubtedly be clear to one of us, but who knows to whom my integral will someday bring these records? Perhaps you, like our ancestors, have read the great book of civilization only up to the page of 900 years ago. Perhaps you don't know even such elementary things as the hour tables, personal hours, maternal norm, green wall, well-doer. It seems droll to me, and at the same time very difficult to explain these things. It is as though, let us say, a writer of the 20th century should start to explain in his novel such words as coat, apartment, wife. Yet, if his novel had been translated for primitive races, how could he have avoided explaining what a coat meant? I am sure that the primitive man would look at a coat and think, "What is this for? It is only a burden, an unnecessary burden." I am sure that you will feel the same if I tell you that not one of us has ever stepped beyond the green wall since the 200 Years' War. But, dear readers, you must think, at least a little. It helps. It is clear that the history of mankind, as far as our knowledge goes, is a history of the transition from nomadic forms to more sedentary ones. Does it not follow that the most sedentary form of life, ours, is at the same time the most perfect one? There was a time when people were rushing from one end of the earth to another, but this was the prehistoric time when such things as nations, wars, commerce, different discoveries of different Americas still existed. Who has need of these things now? I admit, humanity acquired this habit of a sedentary form of life not without difficulty and not at once. When the 200 Years' War had destroyed all the roads, which later were overgrown with grass, it was probably very difficult at first. It seemed uncomfortable to live in cities which were cut off from each other by green debris. But what of it? Man, soon after he lost his tail, probably did not learn at once how to chase away flies without its help. I am almost sure that at first he was even lonesome without his tail, but now, can you imagine yourself with a tail? Or can you imagine yourself walking in the street naked, without clothes? It is possible you go without clothes still. Here we have the same case. I cannot imagine a city which is not clad with a green wall. I cannot imagine a life which is not clad with the figures of our tables. Tables. Now even, purple figures look at me austerely, yet kindly from the golden background of the wall. Involuntarily I am reminded of the thing which was called by the ancients sainted image, and I feel a desire to compose verses or prayers which are the same. Oh, why am not I a poet, so as to be able properly to glorify the tables, the heart and pulse of the United State? All of us, and perhaps all of you, read in childhood while in school that greatest of all monuments of ancient literature, the official railroad guide. But if you compare this with the tables, you will see side by side graphite and diamonds. Both are the same, carbon. But how eternal, transparent, how shining the diamond! Who does not lose his breath when he runs through the pages of the guide? The tables transformed each one of us, actually, into a six-wheeled steel hero of a great poem. Every morning with six-wheeled precision, at the same hour, at the same minute, we wake up, millions of us at once. At the very same hour, millions like one, we begin our work, and millions like one, we finish it. United into a single body, with a million hands, at the very same second, designated by the tables, we carry the spoons to our mouths. At the same second, we all go out to walk, go to the auditorium, to the halls for the tailor exercises, and then to bed. I shall be quite frank. Even we have not attained the absolute exact solution of the problem of happiness. Twice a day, from 16 to 17 o'clock, and from 21 to 22, our united, powerful organism dissolves into separate cells. These are the personal hours designated by the tables. During these hours you would see the curtains discreetly drawn in the rooms of some. Others march slowly over the pavement of the main avenue, or sit at their desks as I sit now. But I firmly believe, let them call me an idealist and a dreamer, I believe that sooner or later we shall somehow find, even for these hours, a place in the general formula. Somehow, all of the 86,400 seconds will be incorporated in the table of hours. I have had the opportunity to read and hear many improbable things about those times when human beings still lived in the state of freedom, that is, an unorganized primitive state. One thing has always seemed to me the most improbable. How could a government, even a primitive government, permit people to live without anything like our tables, without compulsory walks, without precise regulation of the time to eat, for instance? They would get up and go to bed whenever they liked. Some historians even say that in those days the streets were lighted all night, and all night people went about the streets. That I cannot understand. True, their minds were rather limited in those days. Yet they should have understood, should they not, that such a life was actually wholesale murder, although slow murder, day after day. The state, humanitarianism, forbade in those days the murder of one person, but it did not forbid the killing of millions slowly and by half. To kill one, that is, to reduce the general sum of human life by 50 years, was considered criminal. But to reduce the general sum of human life by 50 million years was not considered criminal. Is it not droll? Today, this simple mathematical moral problem could easily be solved in half a minute's time by any 10-year-old number, yet they couldn't do it. All their Immanuel Kants together couldn't do it. It didn't enter the heads of all their Kants to build a system of scientific ethics, that is, ethics based on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Further, is it not absurd that their state, they called it state, left sexual life absolutely without control? However, whenever, and as much as they wanted. Absolutely unscientific, like beasts, and like beasts, they blindly gave birth to children. Is it not strange to understand gardening, chicken farming, fishery? We have definite knowledge that they were familiar with all these things, and not to be able to reach the last step in this logical scale, namely, production of children, not to be able to discover such things as maternal and paternal norms? It is so droll, so improbable, that while I write this, I am afraid lest you, my unknown future readers, should think I am merely a bad jester. I feel almost as though you may think I simply want to mock you, and with a most serious appearance try to relate to you absolute nonsense. But first, I am incapable of jesting, for in every joke a lie has its hidden function. And second, the science of the United States contends that the life of the ancients was exactly what I am describing, and the science of the United States cannot make a mistake. Yet, how could they have state logic, since they lived in a condition of freedom like beasts, like apes, like herds? What could one expect of them, since even in our day one hears from time to time, coming from the bottom, the primitive depths, the echo of the apes? Fortunately, it happens only from time to time, very seldom. Happily, it is only a case of small parts breaking. These may easily be repaired without stopping the eternal great march of the whole machine. And in order to eliminate a broken peg, we have the skillful heavy hand of the well-doer. We have the experienced eyes of the guardians. By the way, I just thought of that number whom I met yesterday, the double-curved one like the letter S. I think I have seen him several times coming out of the Bureau of the Guardians. Now I understand why I felt such an instinctive respect for him, and a kind of awkwardness when that strange I-330 at his side. I must confess that They ring the bell. Time to sleep. It is 22:30. Till tomorrow, then. Record 4. The Wild Man with a Barometer. Epilepsy. If. Until today, everything in my life seemed to me clear. That is why, I think, I always had a sort of partiality toward the word clear. But today, I don't understand. First, I really was assigned to Auditorium 112, as she said, although the probability was as 500 to 10 million, or 1 to 20,000. 500 is the number of auditoriums, and there are 10 million numbers. And second, but let me relate things in successive order. The auditorium, an enormous half-globe of glass with the sun piercing through. The circular rows of noble, globe-like, closely shaven heads. With joy in my heart I looked around. I believe I was looking in the hope of seeing the rose-colored scythe, the dear lips of O, somewhere among the blue waves of the Eunice. Then I saw extraordinarily white, sharp teeth, like the... But no! Tonight at 21 o'clock, O was to come to me. Therefore my desire to see her was quite natural. The bell. We stood up, sang the hymn of the United States, and our clever phono-lecturer appeared on the platform with a sparkling golden megaphone. Respected numbers, not so long ago our archaeologists dug up a book written in the 20th century. In this book, the ironical author tells about a wild man and a barometer. The wild man noticed that every time the barometer's hand stopped on the word rain, it actually rained. And as the wild man craved rain, he let out as much mercury as was necessary to put it at the level of the word rain. On the screen, a wild man with feathers letting out the mercury. Laughter. You are laughing at him, but don't you think the European of that age deserves more to be laughed at? He, like the wild man, wanted rain. Rain with a little r, an algebraic rain, but he remained standing before the barometer like a wet hen. The wild man, at least, had more courage and more energy and logic, although primitive logic. The wild man showed the ability to establish a connection between cause and effect. By letting out the mercury, he made the first step on the path which... Here, I repeat, I am not concealing anything. I am setting down everything. I suddenly became impermeable to the quickening currents coming from the megaphone. I suddenly felt I had come here in vain. Why in vain, and how could I not have come here, where I was assigned? Everything seemed to me empty, like a shell. I succeeded with difficulty in switching my attention in again when the phono-lecturer came to the main theme of the evening, to our music as a mathematical composition. Mathematics is the cause, music is the effect. The phono-lecturer began the description of the recently invented musicometer. By merely rotating this handle, anyone is enabled to produce about 3 sonatas per hour. What difficulties our predecessors had in making music! They were able to compose only by bringing themselves to strokes of inspiration, an extinct form of epilepsy. Here you have an amazing illustration of their achievements. The music of Scriabin, 20th century. This black box. A curtain parted the platform, and we saw an ancient instrument. This box they called the Royal Grand. They attached to this the idea of regality, which also goes to prove how their music... And I don't remember anything further. Very possibly because, I'll tell you frankly, because she, I-330, came to the royal box. Probably I was simply startled by her unexpected appearance on the platform. She was dressed in a fantastic dress of the ancient time, a black dress closely fitting the body, sharply delimiting the white of her shoulders and breast, and that warm shadow waving with her breath between, and the dazzling, almost angry teeth, a smile, a bite directed downward. She took her seat. She began to play something wild, convulsive, loud, like all their life then, not a shadow of rational mechanism. Of course, all those around me were right. They were laughing. Only a few. But why is it that I... Yes, epilepsy, a mental disease, a pain, a slow, sweet pain. Bite, and it goes deeper and becomes sharper. And then, slowly, sunshine. Not our sunshine, not crystalline, bluish and soft, coming through the glass bricks. No, a wild sunshine, rushing and burning, tearing everything into small bits. The number at my left glanced at me and chuckled. I don't know why, but I remember exactly how a microscopic saliva bubble appeared on his lips and burst. That bubble brought me back to myself. I was I again. Like all the other numbers, I heard now only the senseless, disorderly cracking of the chords. I laughed. I felt so light and simple. The gifted phonolecturer represented to us only too well that wild epoch, and that was all. With what a joy I listened afterward to our contemporary music. It was demonstrated to us at the end of the lecture for the sake of contrast. Crystalline, chromatic scales converging and diverging into endless series, and the synthetic harmony of the formulae of Taylor and Maclaurin, wholesome, square, and massive like the trousers of Pythagoras. Sad melodies dying away in waving movements. The beautiful texture of the spectrum of planets, dissected by Fraunhofer lines. What magnificent, what perfect regularity! How pitiful the wilful music of the ancients, not limited except by the scope of their wild imaginations! As usual, in good order, four abreast, all of us left the auditorium. The familiar double-curved figure passed swiftly by. I respectfully bowed. Dear O was to come in an hour. I felt agitated, agreeably and usefully. Home at last. I rushed to the house office, handed over to the controller on duty my pink ticket, and received a certificate permitting the use of the curtains. This right exists in our state only for the sexual days. Normally, we live surrounded by transparent walls, which seem to be knitted of sparkling air. We live beneath the eye of everyone, always bathed in light. We have nothing to conceal from one another. Besides, this mode of living makes the difficult and exalted task of the guardians much easier. Without it, many bad things might happen. It is possible that the strange, opaque dwellings of the ancients were responsible for their pitiful, selfish psychology. My home is my fortress. How did they manage to think of such things? At 22 o'clock, I lowered the curtain, and at the same second, O came in smiling, slightly out of breath. She extended to me her rosy lips and her pink ticket. I tore off the stub, but I could not tear myself away from the rosy lips up to the last moment. 22:15. Then I showed her my diary, and I talked. I think I talked very well on the beauty of a square, a cube, a straight line. At first she listened so charmingly. She was so rosy, when suddenly a tear appeared in her blue eyes, then another, and a third fell straight on the open page, page 7. The ink blurred. Well, I shall have to copy it again. My dear O, if only you... If what? Again, the old lament about a child, or perhaps something new regarding the other one. Although it seems as though some. But that would be too absurd. Record 5. The square, the rulers of the world, an agreeable and useful function. Again with you, my unknown reader. I talk to you as though you were, let us say, my old comrade, R13, the poet with the lips of a Negro. Well, everyone knows him. Yet you were somewhere on the moon, or on Venus, or on Mars. Who knows you? Where and who are you? Imagine a square, a living, beautiful square. Imagine that this square is obliged to tell you about itself, about its life. You realize that this square would hardly think it necessary to mention the fact that all its four angles are equal. It knows this all too well. This is such an ordinary, obvious thing. I am in exactly the same square position. Take the pink checks, for instance, and all that goes with them. For me, they are as natural as the equality of the four angles of the square. But for you, they are perhaps more mysterious and hard to understand than the binomial of Newton. Let me explain. An ancient sage once said a clever thing, accidentally beyond doubt. He said, "Love and hunger rule the world." Consequently, to dominate the world, man had to win a victory over hunger after paying a very high price. I refer to the great 200 Years' War, the war between the city and the land. Probably on account of religious prejudices, the primitive peasants stubbornly held on to their bread. In the 35th year before the foundation of the United States, our contemporary petroleum food was invented. True, only about 2/10 of the population of the globe did not die out, but how beautifully shining the face of the earth became when it was cleared of its impurities. Accordingly, the .2 which survived have enjoyed the greatest happiness in the bosom of the United States. But is it not clear that supreme bliss and envy are only the numerator and denominator, respectively, of the same fraction, happiness? What sense would the innumerable sacrifices of the 200 Years' War have for us if a reason were left in our life for jealousy? Yet such a reason persisted because there remained button-like noses and classical noses. See our conversation during the promenade. For there were some whose love was sought by everyone, and others whose love was sought by no one. Naturally, having conquered hunger, that is, algebraically speaking, having achieved the total of bodily welfare, the United States directed its attack against the second ruler of the world, against love. At last, this element was also conquered, that is, organized and put into a mathematical formula. It is already 300 years since our great historic Lex Sexualis was promulgated. A number may obtain a license to use any other number as a sexual product. The rest is only a matter of technique. You are carefully examined in the laboratory of the sexual department, where they find the content of the sexual hormones in your blood, and they make out for you, accordingly, a table of sexual days. Then you file an application to enjoy the services of number so-and-so or numbers so-and-so. You get for that purpose a checkbook. Pink. And that is all. It is clear that under such circumstances there is no more reason for envy or jealousy. The denominator of the fraction of happiness is reduced to zero, and the whole fraction is thus converted into a magnificent infiniteness. This thing, which was for the ancients the source of innumerable stupid tragedies, has been converted in our time into a harmonious, agreeable, and useful function of the organism, a function like sleep, like physical labor, the taking of food, digestion, etc., etc. Hence you see how the great power of logic purifies everything it happens to touch. Oh, if only you unknown readers can conceive this divine power. If you will only learn to follow it to the end. It is very strange. While I was writing today of the loftiest summit of human history, all the while I breathed the purest mountain air of thought, but within me it was and remains cloudy, cobwebby, and there's a kind of cross-like four-pawed X. Or perhaps it is my paws, and I feel like that only because they are always before my eyes. My hairy paws. I don't like to talk about them. I dislike them. They are a trace of a primitive epoch. Is it possible that there is in me? I wanted to strike out all this because it trespasses on the limits of my synopsis. But then I decided, no, I shall not. Let this diary give the curve of the most imperceptible vibrations of my brain, like a precise seismograph, for at times such vibrations serve as forewarnings. Certainly this is absurd. This certainly should be stricken out. We have conquered all the elements. Catastrophes are not possible anymore. Now everything is clear to me. The peculiar feeling inside is a result of that very same square situation of which I spoke in the beginning. There is no X in me. There can be none. I am simply afraid lest some X will be left in you, my unknown readers. I believe you will understand that it is harder for me to write than it ever was for any author throughout human history. Some of them wrote for contemporaries, some for the future generations, but none of them ever wrote for their ancestors, or beings like their primitive, distant ancestors. Record 6. An accident. The cursed, it's clear, 24 hours. I must repeat, I made it my duty to write concealing nothing. Therefore, I must point out now that, sad as it may be, the process of hardening and crystallization of life has evidently not been completed, even here in our state. A few steps remain to be made before we reach the ideal. The ideal, it's clear, is to be found where nothing happens. But here, I will give you an example. In the state paper, I read that in 2 days the holiday of justice will be celebrated on the Plaza of the Cube. This means that, again, some number has impeded the smooth run of the great state machine. Again, something that was not foreseen or forecalculated happened. Besides, something happened to me. True, it occurred during the personal hour, that is, during the time specifically assigned to unforeseen circumstances, yet at about 16, to be exact 10 minutes to 16, I was at home. Suddenly, the telephone. D503? A woman's voice. Yes. Are you free? Yes. It is I-330. I shall run over to you immediately. We shall go together to the ancient house. Agreed? I-330. This I irritates me. She repels me. She almost frightens me. But just because of that, I answered, yes. In 5 minutes we were in an arrow. Blue sky of May. The light sun in its golden arrow buzzed behind us without catching up and without lagging behind. Ahead of us, a white cataract of a cloud. Yes, a white cataract of a cloud, nonsensically fluffy, like the cheeks of an ancient Cupid. That cloud was disturbing. The front window was open. It was windy. Lips were dry. Against one's will, one passed the tongue constantly over them and thought about lips. Already we saw in the distance the hazy green spots on the other side of the wall. Then a slight, involuntary sinking of the heart. Down, 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 as if from a steep mountain. And we were at the ancient house. That strange, delicate, blind establishment is covered all around with a glass shell, otherwise it would undoubtedly have fallen to pieces long ago. At the glass door we found an old woman, all wrinkles, especially her mouth, which was all made up of folds and pleats. Her lips had disappeared, having folded inward. Her mouth seemed grown together. It seemed incredible that she should be able to talk, and yet she did.
Well, dear, come again to see my little house?
Her wrinkles alone, that is. Her wrinkles diverged like rays, which created the impression of shining.
Yes, grandmother,
answered I-330. The wrinkles continued to shine.
And the sun. Do you see it, you rogue, you? I know. It's all right. Go all by yourselves. I shall remain here in the sunshine.
Apparently my companion was a frequent guest here. Something disturbed me. Probably that unpleasant optical impression, the cloud on the smooth blue surface of the sky. While we were ascending the wide, dark stairs, I-330 said, "I love her, that old woman." "Why?"
"I don't know. Perhaps for her mouth, or perhaps for nothing. Just so."
I shrugged my shoulders. She continued walking upstairs with a faint smile, or perhaps without a smile at all. I felt very guilty. It is clear that there must not be love just so, but love because of, for all elements of nature should be. "It's clear," I began, but I stopped at that word and cast a furtive look at I-330. Did she notice it or not? She looked somewhere, down. Her eyes were closed like curtains. It struck me suddenly. Evening about 22. You walk on the avenue, and among the brightly lighted, transparent cubic cells are dark spaces, lowered curtains, and there behind the curtains. What has she behind her curtains? Why did she phone me today? Why did she bring me here? And all this? She opened a heavy, squeaking, opaque door, and we found ourselves in a somber, disorderly space. They called it an apartment. The same strange, royal musical instrument, and a wild, unorganized, crazy loudness of colors and forms like their ancient music. A white plane above, dark blue walls, red, green, orange bindings of ancient books, yellow bronze candelabras, a statue of Buddha, furniture with lines distorted by epilepsy, impossible to reduce to any clear equation. I could hardly bear that chaos, but my companion apparently possessed a stronger constitution.
"This is my most beloved."
She suddenly caught herself. Again a smile bite and white, sharp teeth.
"To be more exact, the most nonsensical of all apartments."
Or, to be most exact, of all the states. Thousands of microscopic states, fighting eternal wars, pitiless, like—
"Oh, yes, it's clear."
said I-330 with apparent sincerity. We passed through a room where we found a few small children's beds. Children in those days were also private property. Then more rooms, glimmering mirrors, somber closets, unbearably loud-colored divans, an enormous fireplace, a large mahogany bed. Our contemporary, beautiful, transparent, eternal glass was represented here only by pitiful, delicate, tiny squares of windows. And to think, here there was love just so. They burned and tortured themselves. Again, the curtain of the eyes was lowered. What a stupid, uneconomical spending of human energy. Am I not right? She spoke as though reading my thoughts, but in her smile there remained always that irritating X. There behind the curtains something was going on. I don't know what, but something that made me lose my patience. I wanted to quarrel with her, to scream at her. Exactly to scream. But I had to agree. It was impossible not to agree. We stopped in front of a mirror. At that moment I saw only her eyes. An idea came to me. Human beings are built as nonsensically as these stupid apartments. Human heads are opaque, and there are only two very small windows that lead inside, the eyes. She seemed to have guessed my thoughts. She turned around. Well, here they are, my eyes. Well, this suddenly, then silence. There were in front of me two gloomy dark windows, and behind them, inside, such a strange hidden life. I saw there only fire, burning like a peculiar fireplace, and unknown figures resembling. All this was certainly very natural. I saw in her eyes the reflection of my own face, but my feelings were unnatural and not like me. Evidently, the depressing influence of the surroundings was beginning to tell on me. I felt definitely fear. I felt as if I were trapped and caged in a strange cage. And I felt that I was caught in the wild hurricane of ancient life. Do you know, said I-330, step out for a moment into the next room. Her voice came from there, from inside, from behind the dark window eyes, where the fireplace was blazing. I went out, sat down. From a shelf on the wall there looked straight into my face, somewhat smiling, a snub-nosed, asymmetrical physiognomy of one of the ancient poets. I think it was Pushkin. Why do I sit here enduring this smile with such resignation? And what is this all about? Why am I here? And why all these strange sensations? This irritating, repellent female? This strange game? The door of the closet slammed. There was the rustle of silk. I felt it difficult to restrain myself from getting up, and I don't remember exactly. Probably I wanted to tell her a number of disagreeable things, but she had already appeared. She was dressed in a short, bright yellowish dress, black hat, black stockings. The dress was of light silk. I saw very clearly long black stockings above the knees, an uncovered neck, and the shadow between. It's clear that you want to seem original, but is it possible that you— It is clear, interrupted I-330, that to be original means to stand out among others. Consequently, to be original means to violate the law of equality. What was called in the language of the ancients to be common is with us only fulfilling of one's duty. For— Yes, exactly, I interrupted impatiently. And there is no use. She came near the bust of the snub-nosed poet, lowered the curtains on the wild fire of her eyes, and said, "This time I think she was really in earnest, or perhaps she merely wanted to soften my impatience with her, but she said a very reasonable thing. Don't you think it's surprising that once people could stand types like this? Not only stand them, but worship them. What a slavish spirit, don't you think so?" "It's clear, that is, I wanted... Damn that cursed it's clear." "Oh, yes, I understand. But in fact, these were rulers stronger than the crowned ones. Why were they not isolated and exterminated? In our state..." "Oh, yes, in our state," I began. Suddenly she laughed. I saw the laughter in her eyes. I saw the resounding sharp curve of that laughter, flexible, tense like a whip. I remember my whole body shivered. I thought of grasping her, and I don't know what. I had to do something, mattered little what. Automatically I looked at my golden badge, glanced at my watch. 10 minutes to 17. "Don't you think it is time to go?" I said in as polite a tone as possible. "And if I should ask you to stay here with me?" "What? Do you realize what you're saying? In 10 minutes I must be in the auditorium." "And all the numbers must take the prescribed courses in art and science," said I-330 with my voice. Then she lifted the curtain, opened her eyes. Through the dark windows the fire was blazing. "I have a physician in the medical bureau. He is registered to me. If I ask him, he will give you a certificate declaring that you are ill. All right?" Understood. At last I understood where this game was leading. "Ah, so. But you know that every honest number, as a matter of course, must immediately go to the office of the guardians, and as a matter not of course." Sharp smile bite. "I am very curious to know. Will you, or will you not go to the guardians?" "Are you going to remain here?" I grasped the knob of the door. It was a brass knob, a cold brass knob, and I heard, cold like brass, her voice. "Just a minute, may I?" She went to the telephone, called a number. I was so upset it escaped me, and spoke loudly. "I shall be waiting for you in the ancient house. Yes, yes, alone." I turned the cold brass knob. "May I take the arrow?" "Oh, yes, certainly, please." In the sunshine at the gate the old woman was dozing like a plant. Again I was surprised to see her grown-together mouth open, and to hear her say,
"And your lady, did she remain alone?"
"Alone." The mouth of the old woman grew together again. She shook her head. Apparently, even her weakening brain understood the stupidity and the danger of the behavior of that woman. At 17 o'clock exactly, I was at the lecture. There I suddenly realized that I did not tell the whole truth to the old woman. I-330 was not there alone now. Possibly this fact, that I involuntarily told the old woman a lie, was torturing me now and distracting my attention. Yes, not alone. That was the point. After 21:30 o'clock I had a free hour. I could therefore have gone to the office of the guardians to make my report, but after that stupid adventure I was so tired. Besides, the law provides 2 days. I shall have time tomorrow. I have another 24 hours. Record 7. An Eyelash, Taylor, Henbane and Lily of the Valley. Night. Green, orange, blue. the red royal instrument, the yellow dress, then a brass Buddha. Suddenly it lifted the brass eyelids and sap began to flow from it, from Buddha. Sap also from the yellow dress. Even in the mirror, drops of sap, and from the large bed, and from the children's bed, and soon from myself. It is horror, mortally sweet horror. I woke up. Soft blue light, the glass of the walls, of the chairs, of the table was glimmering. This calmed me. My heart stopped palpitating. Sap! Buddha! How absurd! I am sick, it is clear. I never saw dreams before. They say that to see dreams was a common, normal thing with the ancients. Yes, after all, their life was a whirling carousel. Green, orange, Buddha, sap. But we, people of today, we all too well know that dreaming is a serious mental disease. Is it possible that my brain, this precise, clean, glittering mechanism, like a chronometer without a speck of dust on it, is... Yes, it is, now. I really feel there in the brain some foreign body like an eyelash in the eye. One does not feel one's whole body, but this eye with a hair in it. One cannot forget it for a second. The cheerful, crystalline sound of the bell in my head. 7 o'clock. Time to get up. To the right and to the left, as in mirrors, to the right and to the left through the glass walls, I see others like myself, other rooms like my own, other clothes like my own, movements like mine, duplicated thousands of times. This invigorates me. I see myself as part of an enormous, vigorous, united body, and what precise beauty! Not a single superfluous gesture, or bow, or turn. Yes, this tailor was undoubtedly the greatest genius of the ancients. True, he did not come to the idea of applying his method to the whole life, to every step throughout the 24 hours of the day. He was unable to integrate his system from 1 o'clock to 24. I cannot understand the ancients. How could they write whole libraries about some Kant, and take notice only slightly of Taylor, of this prophet who saw 10 centuries ahead? Breakfast was over. The hymn of the United States had been harmoniously sung. Rhythmically, 4 abreast, we walked to the elevators. The motors buzzed faintly, and swiftly we went down, 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 the heart sinking slightly. Again, that stupid dream, or some unknown function of that dream. Oh yes, yesterday in the arrow, then down, down. Well, it is all over, anyhow. Period. It is very fortunate that I was so firm and brusque with her. The car of the Underground Railway carried me swiftly to the place where the motionless, beautiful body of the Integral, not yet spiritualized by fire, was glittering in the docks in the sunshine. With closed eyes I dreamed in formulae. Again I calculated in my mind what was the initial velocity required to tear away the Integral from the earth. Every second, the mass of the Integral would change because of the expenditure of the explosive fuel. The equation was very complex, with transcendent figures. As in a dream, I felt, right here in the firm, calculated world, how someone sat down at my side, barely touching me, and saying, "Pardon." I opened my eyes. At first, apparently because of an association with the Integral, I saw something impetuously flying into the distance, ahead. I saw pink wing ears sticking out on the sides of it, then the curve of the overhanging back of the head, the double-curved letter S. Through the glass walls of my algebraic world, again I felt the eyelash in my eye. I felt something disagreeable. I felt that today I must. Certainly, please. I smiled at my neighbor and bowed. Number S4711. I saw glittering on his golden badge. That is why I associated him with the letter S from the very first moment, an optical impression which remained unregistered by consciousness. His eyes sparkled. Two sharp little drills. They were revolving swiftly, drilling in deeper and deeper. It seemed that in a moment they would drill into the bottom and would see something that I do not even dare to confess to myself. That bothersome eyelash became wholly clear to me. S was one of them, one of the guardians, and it would be the simplest thing, immediately, without deferring, to tell him everything. I went yesterday to the ancient house. My voice was strange, husky, flat. I tried to cough. That is good. It must have given you material for some instructive deductions. Yes, but, you see, I was not alone. I was in the company of I-330, and then... I-330? You are fortunate. She is a very interesting, gifted woman. She has a host of admirers. But he, too. Then during the promenade, perhaps he is even assigned as her he number. No, it is impossible to tell him. Unthinkable. This was perfectly clear. Yes, certainly, very. I smiled, broader and broader, more stupidly, and felt as if my smile made me look foolish, naked. The drills reached the bottom. Revolving continually, they screwed themselves back into his eyes. S smiled, double-curvedly, nodded, and slid to the exit. I covered my face with the newspaper. I felt as if everybody were looking at me. And soon I forgot about the eyelash, about the little drills, about everything. I was so upset by what I read in the paper. According to authentic information, traces of an organization which still remains out of reach have again been discovered. This organization aims at liberation from the beneficial yoke of the state. Liberation? It is remarkable how persistent human criminal instincts are. I use deliberately the word criminal, for freedom and crime are as closely related as, well, as the motion of an arrow and its speed. If the speed of an arrow equals 0, the arrow is motionless. If human liberty is equal to 0, man does not commit any crime. That is clear. The way to rid man of criminality is to rid him of freedom. No sooner did we rid ourselves of freedom, in the cosmic sense centuries are only a no sooner, than suddenly some unknown pitiful degenerates. Now, I cannot understand why I did not go immediately yesterday to the Bureau of the Guardians. Today, after 16 o'clock, I shall go there without fail. At 16:10, I was in the street. At once, I noticed 090 at the corner. She was all rosy with delight at the encounter. She has a simple, round mind. A timely meeting. She would not understand and lend me support. Or, no, I did not need any support. My decision was firm. The pipes of the musical tower thundered out harmoniously the march, the same daily march. How wonderful the charm of this dailiness, of this constant repetition and mirror-like smoothness. Out for a walk? Her round blue eyes opened toward me widely, blue windows leading inside. I penetrate there unhindered. There is nothing in there. I mean, nothing foreign, nothing superfluous. No, Not for a walk. I must go. I told her where, and to my astonishment, I saw her rosy round mouth form a crescent, with the horns downward as if she tasted something sour. This angered me. You she-numbers seem to be incurably eaten up by prejudices. You are absolutely unable to think abstractly. Forgive me the word, but this I call bluntness of the mind. You? To the spies? How ugly! And I went to the botanical garden and brought you a branch of lily of the valley. Why and I? Why this and? Just like a woman! Angrily, this I must confess, I snatched the flowers. Here they are, your lilies of the valley. Well, smell them. Good, yes. Why not use a little bit of logic? The lilies of the valley smell good. All right. But you cannot say about an odor, about the conception of an odor, that it is good or bad, can you? You can't, can you? There is the smell of lilies of the valley, and there is disagreeable smell of henbane. Both are odors. The ancient states had their spies. We have ours. Yes, spies. I am not afraid of words, but it is not clear to you that there the spies were henbane. Here they are lilies of the valley. Yes, lilies of the valley. Yes. The rosy crescent quivered. Now I understand that it was only my impression, but at that moment I was certain she was going to laugh. I shouted still louder. Yes, lilies of the valley, and there is nothing funny about it. Nothing funny! The smooth, round globes of heads passing by were turning towards us. 090 gently took my hand. You are so strange today. Are you ill? My dream. Yellow color. Buddha. It was once borne clearly upon me that I must go to the medical bureau. Yes, you are right. I am sick, I said with joy. That seems to me an inexplicable contradiction. There is nothing to be joyful about. You must go at once to the doctor. You understand that you are obliged to be healthy. It seems strange to have to prove it to you. My dear O, of course you are right. Absolutely right. I did not go to the Bureau of the Guardians. I could not. I had to go to the Medical Bureau. They kept me there until 17 o'clock. In the evening, incidentally, the Bureau of Guardians is closed evenings. In the evening, O came to see me. The curtains were not lowered. We busied ourselves with the arithmetical problems of an ancient textbook. This occupation always calms and purifies our thoughts. O sat over her notebook, her head slightly inclined to the left. She was so assiduous that she poked out her left cheek with the tongue from within. She looked so childlike, so charming. I felt everything in me was pleasant, precise, and simple. She left. I remained alone. I breathed deeply 2 times. It is very good exercise before retiring for the night. Suddenly, an unexpected odor reminiscent of something very disagreeable. I soon found out what was the matter. A branch of lily of the valley was hidden in my bed. Immediately, everything was aroused again, came up from the bottom. Decidedly, it was tactless on her part surreptitiously to put these lilies of the valley there. Well, true, I did not go. I didn't. But was it my fault that I felt indisposed? Record 8. An irrational root. R13. The Triangle. It was long ago during my school days when I first encountered the square root of -1. I remember it all very clearly. a bright globe-like class hall, about 100 round heads of children, and Plappa, our mathematician. We nicknamed him Plappa. It was a very much used-up mathematician, loosely screwed together, as the member of the class who was on duty that day would be putting the plug into the socket behind. We would hear at first from the megaphone, plap, 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 shh. Only then would the lesson follow. One day, Plappa told us about irrational numbers, and I remember I wept and banged the table with my fist and cried, "I do not want that square root of -1. Take that square root of -1 away." This irrational root grew into me as something strange, foreign, terrible. It tortured me. It could not be thought out. It could not be defeated because it was beyond reason. Now that square root of -1 is here again. I read over what I have written, and I clearly see that I was insincere with myself, that I lied to myself in order to avoid seeing that square root of -1. My sickness, etc., is all nonsense. I could go there. I feel sure that if such a thing had happened a week ago, I should have gone without hesitating. Why, then, am I unable to go now? Why? Today, for instance, at exactly 16:10, I stood before the glittering glass wall. Above was the shining, golden, sun-like sign, Bureau of Guardians. Inside, a long queue of bluish-gray eunuchs awaiting their turns, faces shining like the oil lamps in an ancient temple. They came to accomplish a great thing. They came to put on the altar of the United States their beloved ones, their friends, their own selves. My whole being craved to join them. Yet I could not. My feet were as though melted into the glass plates of the sidewalk. I simply stood there, looking foolish. Heh, mathematician. Dreaming? I shivered. Black eyes varnished with laughter looked at me. Thick Negro lips. It was my old friend the poet, R13, and with him Rosie O. I turned around angrily. I still believe that if they had not appeared, I should have entered the bureau and torn the square root of -1 out of my flesh. Not dreaming at all, if you will, standing in adoration, I retorted quite brusquely. Oh, certainly, certainly. You, my friend, should never have become a mathematician. You should have become a poet, a great poet. Yes, come over to our trade, to the poets. If you will, I can arrange it in a jiffy. R13 usually talks very fast. His words run in torrents. His thick lips sprinkle. Every P is a fountain. Every poet's a fountain. So far I have served knowledge, and I shall continue to serve knowledge. I frowned. I do not understand jokes, and R13 has the bad habit of joking. Heh, to the deuce with knowledge. Your much-heralded knowledge is but a form of cowardice. It is a fact. Yes, you want to encircle the infinite with a wall, and you fear to cast a glance behind the wall. Yes, sir, and if ever you should glance beyond the wall, you would be dazzled and close your eyes. Yes, walls are the foundation of every human, I began. R13 sprinkled his fountain. O laughed rosily and roundly. I waved my hand. Well, you may laugh. I don't care. I was busy with something else. I had to find a way of eating up, of crushing down that square root of -1. Suppose, I offered, we go to my place and do some arithmetical problems. The quiet hour of yesterday afternoon came to my memory. Perhaps today also. O glanced at R. then serenely and roundly at me. The soft, endearing color of our pink cheeks came to her cheeks. But today, I have a check to him today. A glance at R. And tonight he is busy, so that... The moist, varnished lips whispered good-naturedly. "Half an hour is plenty for us, is it not? Oh, I am not a great lover of your problems. Let us simply go over to my place and chat." I was afraid to remain alone with myself, or to be more correct, with that new strange self, who by some curious coincidence bore my number, D503. So I went with R. True, he is not precise, not rhythmic. His logic is jocular, and turned inside out. Yet we are... 3 years ago we both chose our dear Rosie O. This tied our friendship more firmly together than our school days did. In R's room everything seems like mine. The tables, the glass of the chairs, the table, the closet, the bed. But as we entered, R moved one chair out of place, then another. The room became confused. Everything lost the established order and seemed to violate every rule of Euclid's geometry. R remained the same as before. In Taylor and in mathematics, he always lagged at the tail of the class. We recalled Plappa, how we boys used to paste the whole surface of his glass legs with paper notes expressing our thanks. We all loved Plappa. We recalled our priest. It goes without saying that we were taught not the law of ancient religion, but the law of the United States. Our priest had a very powerful voice. A real hurricane would come out of the megaphone, and we children would yell the prescribed texts after him with all our lung power. We recalled how a scapegrace, R13, used to stuff the priest with chewed paper. Every word was thus accompanied by a paper wad shot out. Naturally, R was punished, for what he did was undoubtedly wrong, but now we laughed heartily. By we, I mean our triangle, R, O, and I must confess, too. And what if he had been a living one, like the ancient ones? We'd have a fountain running from his fat, bubbling lips. The sun was shining through the ceiling, the sun above, the sun from the sides, its reflection from below. O on R13's lap, and minute drops of sunlight in O's blue eyes. Somehow my heart warmed up. The square root of -1 became silent and motionless. "Well, how is your integral? Will you soon hop off to enlighten the inhabitants of the planets? You'd better hurry up, my boy, or we poets will have produced such a devilish lot that even your integral will be unable to lift the cargo. Every day from 8 to 11. R wagged his head and scratched the back of it. The back of his head is square. It looks like a little vallus. I recalled for some reason an ancient painting in the cab. I felt more lively. You too are writing for the integral. Tell me about it. What are you writing about? What did you write today, for instance? Today I did not write. Today I was busy with something else. Busy sprinkled straight into my face. What else? Ah frowned. What? What? Well, if you insist, I'll tell you. I was busy with the death sentence. I was putting the death sentence into verse. An idiot, and to be frank, one of our poets. For 2 years we all lived side by side with him, and nothing seemed wrong. Suddenly he went crazy. "I," said he, "am a genius, and I am above the law." All that sort of nonsense. But it is not a thing to talk about. The fat lips hung down. The varnish disappeared from his eyes. He jumped up, turned around, and stared through the wall. I looked at his tightly closed little valise and thought, what is he handling in his little valise now? A moment of awkward, asymmetric silence. I could not see clearly what was the matter, but I was certain there was something. Fortunately, the antediluvian times of those Shakespeares and Dostoevskys, or what were their names, is past, I said in a voice deliberately loud. R turned his face to me. Words sprinkled and bubbled out of him as before, but I thought I noticed there was no more joyful varnish to his eyes. Yes, dear mathematician, fortunately. We are the happy arithmetical mean. As you would put it, the integration from 0 to infinity, from imbeciles to Shakespeare. Do I put it right? I do not know why. It seemed to me absolutely uncalled for. I recalled suddenly the other one, her tone. A thin, invisible thread stretched between her and R. What thread? The square root of -1 began to bother me again. I glanced at my badge. 16:25 o'clock. They had only 35 minutes for the use of the pink check. Well, I must go. I kissed O, shook hands with R, and went to the elevator. As I crossed the avenue, I turned around. Here and there in the huge mass of glass penetrated by sunshine, there were grayish-blue squares, the opaque squares of lowered curtains, the squares of rhythmic, tailorized happiness. On the 7th floor, I found R13 square. The curtains were already lowered. Dear O, dear R. He also has... I do not know why I write this also, but I write as it comes for my pen. He, too, has something which is not entirely clear in him. Yet I, he, and O, we are a triangle. I confess, not an isosceles triangle, but a triangle nevertheless. We, to speak in the language of our ancestors, perhaps to you, my planetary readers, this is more comprehensible language. We are a family. And one feels so good at times, when one is able for a short while at least to close oneself within a firm triangle, to close oneself away from anything that... Record 9. Liturgy, Iambus, the cast-iron hand. A solemn, bright day. On such days one forgets one's weaknesses, inexactitudes, illnesses, and everything is crystalline and imperturbable, like our new glass. The plaza of the cube, 66 imposing concentric circles, stands. 66 rows of quiet, serene faces. Eyes reflecting the shining of the sky, or perhaps it is the shining of the United States. Red like blood are the flowers, the lips of the women. Like soft garlands, the faces of the children in the first rows, nearest the place of action. Profound, austere, Gothic silence. To judge by the descriptions which reach us from the ancients, they felt somewhat like this during their church services, but they served their nonsensical, unknown God. We serve our rational God, whom we most thoroughly know. Their God gave them nothing but eternal, torturing seeking. Our God gives us absolute truth, that is, He has rid us of any kind of doubt. Their God did not invent anything cleverer than sacrificing oneself, nobody knows what for. We bring to our God, the United States, a quiet, rational, carefully thought-out sacrifice. Yes, it was a solemn liturgy for the United States, a reminiscence of the great days, years of the 200 Years' War, a magnificent celebration of the victory of all over one, of the sum over the individual. That one stood on the steps of the cube, which was filled with sunlight. A white, no, not even white, but already colorless glass face, lips of glass. And only the eyes, thirsty, swallowing, black holes leading into that dreadful world from which he was only a few minutes away. The golden badge with the number already had been taken off. His hands were tied with a red ribbon, a symbol of ancient custom. The explanation of it is that in the old times, when this sort of thing was not done in the name of the United States, the convicted naturally considered that they had the right to resist, hence their hands were usually bound with chains. On the top of the cube, next to the machine, the motionless metallic figure of him whom we call the well-doer. One could not see his face from below. All one could see was that it was bounded by austere, magnificent square lines. And his hands. Did you ever notice how sometimes in a photograph the hands, if they were too near the camera, come out enormous? They then compel your attention, overshadow everything else. Those hands of his, heavy hands, quiet for the time being, were stony hands. It seemed the knees on which they rested must have had pains to bear their weight. Suddenly, one of those hands rose slowly, a slow cast-iron gesture. Obeying the will of the lifted hand, a number came out on the platform. It was one of the state's poets, whose fortunate lot it was to crown our celebration with his verses. Divine iambic brass verses thundered over the many stands. They dealt with the man, who, his reason lost and his lips like glass, stood on the steps and waited for the logical consequences of his own insane deeds. Ablaze. Buildings were swaying in those iambic lines, and sprinkling upward their liquefied golden substance. They broke and fell. The green trees were scorched, their sap slowly ran out, and they remained standing like black crosses, like skeletons. Then appeared Prometheus. That meant us. He harnessed fire with machines and steel, and fettered chaos with law. The world was renovated. It became like steel, a sun of steel, trees of steel, men of steel. Suddenly, an insane man unchained the fire and set it free, and again the world had perished. Unfortunately, I have a bad memory for poetry, but one thing I am sure of. One could not choose more instructive or more beautiful parables. Another slow, heavy gesture of the cast-iron hand, and another poet appeared on the steps of the cube. I stood up. Impossible! But thick Negro lips. It was he. Why did he not tell me that he was to be invested with such high... His lips trembled. They were gray. Oh, I certainly understood. To be face to face with the well-doer, face to face with the hosts of guardians. Yet one should not allow oneself to be so upset. Swift, sharp verses like an axe. They told about an unheard-of crime, about sacrilegious poems in which the well-doer was called... But no, I do not dare to repeat. R13 was pale when he finished, and looking at no one, I did not expect such bashfulness of him. He descended and sat down. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, I saw right behind him somebody's face, a sharp black triangle, and instantly I lost it. My eyes, thousands of eyes, were directed upward toward the machine. Then Again, the superhuman cast-iron gesture of the hand. Swayed by an unknown wind, the criminal moved. One step, one more, then the last step in his life. His face was turned to the sky, his head thrown backward. He was on his last. Heavy, stone-like fate. The well-doer went around the machine, put his enormous hand on the lever. Not a whisper, not a breath around. All eyes were upon that hand. What crushing, scorching power one must feel to be the tool, to be the resultant of hundreds of thousands of wills. How great his lot! Another second. The hand moved down, switching in the current. The lightning-sharp blade of the electric ray. A faint crack like a shiver in the tubes of the machine. The prone body covered with a light phosphorescent smoke. Then, suddenly, under the eyes of all, it began to melt, to dissolve with terrible speed. And then nothing. Just a pool of chemically pure water, which only a moment ago was so red and pulsated in his heart. All this was simple. All of us were familiar with the phenomenon. Dissociation of matter. Yes, the splitting of atoms of the human body. Yet every time we witnessed it, it seemed a miracle. It was a symbol of the superhuman power of the well-doer. Above, in front of him, the burning faces of the female numbers, mouths half open from emotion, flowers swaying in the wind. According to custom, 10 women were covering with flowers the uniform of the well-doer, which was still wet with spray. With the magnificent step of a supreme priest, he slowly descended, slowly passed between the rows of stands, and like tender white branches, there rose toward him the arms of the women, and millions like one, our tempestuous cheers. Then cheers in honor of the guardians, who, all unseen, were present among us. Who knows, perhaps the fancy of the ancient man foresaw them centuries ahead, when he created the gentle and formidable guardian angels, assigned to each one from the day of his birth. Yes, there was in our celebrations something of the ancient religions, something purifying like a storm. You, whose lot it may be to read this, are you familiar with such emotions? I am sorry for you if you are not. Record 10. A letter, a manhunt, hairy eye. Yesterday was for me a kind of filter paper which chemists use for filtering their solutions. All suspended and superfluous particles remain on the paper. This morning I went downstairs all purified and distilled, transparent. Downstairs in the hall, the controller sat at a small table, constantly looking at her watch and recording the numbers who were leaving. Her name is Well, I prefer not to give her number, for I fear I may not write kindly about her. Although, as a matter of fact, she is a very respectable, mature woman. The only thing I do not like in her is that her cheeks fold down a little, like gills of a fish, although I do not see anything wrong in this appearance. She scratched with her pen, and I saw on the page D503, and suddenly, splash, an ink blot. No sooner did I open my mouth to call her attention to that than she raised her head and blotted me with an inky smile. There is a letter for you. You will receive it, dear. Yes, you will. I knew a letter, after she had read it, must go through the Bureau of the Guardians. I think it is unnecessary to explain in detail this natural order of things. I would receive it not later than 12 o'clock. But that tiny smile confused me. The drop of ink clouded the transparency of the distilled solution. At the dock of the integral, I could not concentrate. I even made a mistake in my calculations. That never happened to me before. At 12 o'clock, again the rosy brown fishgill smile, and at last the letter was in my hands. I cannot say why I did not read it right there, but I put it in my pocket and ran into my room. I opened it and glanced it over, and sat down. It was the official notification advising me that number I-330 had me assigned to her, and that today at 21 o'clock I was to go to her. Her address was given. No! After all that happened, after I'd showed her, frankly, my attitude toward her. Besides, how could she know that I did not go to the Bureau of the Guardians? She had no way of knowing that I was ill and could not, and despite all this, a dynamo was whirling and buzzing in my head. Buddha, yellow, lilies of the valley, rosy crescent. Besides, O wanted to come to see me today. I am sure she would not believe, how could one believe, that I had absolutely nothing to do with the matter, that I am sure also that we, O and I, will have a difficult, foolish, and absolutely illogical conversation. No, anything but that. Let the situation solve itself mechanically. I shall send her a copy of this official communication. While I was hastily putting the paper in my pocket, I noticed my terrible ape-like hand. I remembered how that day during our walk she took my hand and looked at it. Is it possible that she really... A quarter to 21. A white northern light. Everything was glass, greenish. But it was a different kind of glass, not like ours, not genuine, but very breakable. A thin glass shell, and within that shell things were flying, whirling, buzzing. I should not have been surprised if suddenly the cupola of the auditorium had risen in slowly, rolling clouds of smoke, or if the ripe moon had sent an inky smile, like that one at the little table this morning, or if in all the houses suddenly all the curtains had been lowered, and behind the curtains. I felt something peculiar. My ribs were like iron bars that decidedly interfered, with my heart, giving it too little space. I stood at a glass door on which were the golden letters I-330. I-330 sat at the table with her back to me. She was writing something. I stepped in. Here. I held out the pink check. I received the notification this noon, and here I am. How punctual you are. Just a minute, please. May I? Sit down. I shall finish in a minute. She lowered her eyes to the letter. What had she there, behind her lowered curtains? What would she say? And what would she do in a second? How to learn it? How to calculate it, since she comes from beyond, from the wild ancient land of dreams? I looked at her in silence. My ribs were iron bars. The space for the heart was too small. When she speaks, her face is like a swiftly revolving, glittering wheel. You cannot see the separate bars. But at that moment the wheel was motionless. I saw a strange combination. Dark eyebrows running right to the temples, a sharp, mocking triangle, and still another dark triangle with its apex upward. Two deep wrinkles from the nose to the angles of the mouth, and these two triangles somehow contradicted each other. They gave the whole face that disagreeable, irritating X, or cross, a face obliquely marked by a cross. The wheel started to turn, its bars blurred. So, you did not go to the Bureau of Guardians after all? I did. I did not feel well. I could not. Yes, I thought so. Something must have prevented you. Matters little what. Sharp teeth, a smile. But now you are in my hands. You remember, any number who within 48 hours fails to report to the Bureau is considered. My heart banged so forcibly that the iron bars bent. If I were not sitting, like a little boy, how stupid. I was caught like a little boy, and I kept silent. I felt I was in a net, neither my legs nor my arms. She stood up and stretched herself lazily. She pressed the button, and the curtains on all four walls fell with a slight rustle. I was cut off from the rest of the world, alone with her. She was somewhere behind me, near the closet door. The uniform was rustling, falling. I was listening, all listening. I remembered. No, it glistened in my mind for 1/100th of a second. I once had to calculate the curve of a street membrane of a new type. These membranes are handsomely decorated and are placed on all the avenues, registering all street conversations for the Bureau of Guardians. I remembered a rosy concave, trembling membrane, a strange being consisting of one organ only, an ear. I was at that moment such a membrane. Now the click of the snap button at her collar, at her breast, and lower. The glassy silk rustled over her shoulders and knees, over the floor. I heard, and this was clearer than actual seeing, I heard how one foot stepped out of the grayish-blue heap of silk, then the other. Soon I'd hear the creak of the bed, and the tensely stretched membrane trembled and registered the silence. No, the sharp, hammer-like blows of the heart against the iron bars and endless pauses between beats. And I saw, how she, behind me, hesitated for a second, thinking. The door of the closet had slammed. Again, silk, silk. Well, all right. I turned around. She was dressed in a saffron-yellow dress of an ancient style. This was 1,000 times worse than if she had not been dressed at all. 2 sharp points through the thin tissue, glowing with rosiness, 2 burning embers piercing through ashes, 2 tender, round knees. She was sitting in a low armchair. In front of her, on a small square table, I noticed a bottle filled with something poisonously green, and 2 small glasses on thin legs. In the corner of her mouth she had a very thin paper tube. She was ejecting smoke, formed by the burning of that ancient smoking substance whose name I do not now remember. The membrane was still vibrating. Within, the sledgehammer was pounding the red-hot iron bars of my chest. I heard distinctly every blow of the hammer, and what if she too heard it? But she continued to produce smoke very calmly. Calmly she looked at me, and nonchalantly she flicked ashes on the pink check. With as much self-control as possible, I asked, "If you still feel that way, why did you have me assigned to you? And why did you make me come here?" As if she had not heard at all, she poured some of the green liquid from the bottle into a small glass and sipped it. "Wonderful liqueur. Want some?" Then I understood. Alcohol. Like lightning there came to memory what I saw yesterday. The stony hand of the well-doer, the unbearable blade of the electric ray, there on the cube, the head thrown backward, the stretched-out body. I shivered. "Please, listen," I said. "You know, do you not, that anyone who poisons himself with nicotine more particularly with alcohol, is severely treated by the United States. Dark brows raised high to the temples, the sharp, mocking triangle. It is more reasonable to annihilate a few than to allow many to poison themselves, and degeneration, etc. This is true to the point of indecency. Indecency? Yes. To let out into the street such a group of bald-headed, naked little truths. Only imagine, please. Imagine, say, that persistent admirer of mine, S. Well, you know him. Then imagine if he should discard the deception of clothes and appear in public in his true form. Oh! She laughed, but I clearly saw her lower, sorrowful triangle. 2 deep grooves from the nose to the mouth, and for some reason these grooves made me think. That double-curved being, half-hunched with wing-like ears. He embraced her? Oh! Naturally, I try now merely to express my abnormal feelings of that moment. Now, as I write, I understand perfectly that all this is as it should be, that he, S4711, like any other honest number, has a perfect right to the joys of life, and that it would be unjust. But I think the point is quite clear. I-330 laughed a long, strange laugh. Then she cast a look at me, into me. The most curious thing is that I am not in the least afraid of you. You are such a dear, I'm sure of it. You would never think of going to the bureau and reporting that I drink liqueurs and smoke. You will be sick or busy, or I don't know what. Furthermore, I am sure you will drink this charming poison with me. What an impertinent, mocking tone! I felt definitely in that moment I should hate her. Why, in a moment? In fact, I hated her all the time. I-330 turned over the little glass of green poison straight into her mouth. Then she stood up, and all rosy through the translucent saffron yellow tissue, she made a few steps, and stopped behind my chair. Suddenly her arms were about my neck. Her lips grew into mine. No, even somewhere much deeper, much more terribly. I swear all this was very unexpected for me. That is why, perhaps, for I could not. At this moment I see clearly. I could not myself have the desire to. Unbearably sweet lips. I suppose it was the taste of the liqueur. It was as though burning poison were being poured into me, and more, and more. I tore away from the earth and began revolving as an independent planet, down, down, following an incalculable curve. What happened next I am able to describe only in an approximate way, only by way of more or less corresponding analogies. It never occurred to me before, but it is true. We who live on Earth, we are always walking over a seething red sea of fire which is hidden in the womb of the earth. We never think of it. But imagine the ground under our feet suddenly transformed into a thin glass shell. Suddenly we should behold. I became glass-like and saw within myself. There were 2 selves in me. One, the former D503. Number D503. And the other. Before, that other used only to show his hairy paws from time to time, but now the whole other self left his shell. That shell was breaking, and in a moment. Grasping with all my strength the last straw, the arms of the chair, I asked loudly, so as to hear my first self, "Where? Where did you get this poison?"
"Oh, this? A physician. One of my
What?" And my other self jumped up suddenly and yelled, "I won't allow it. I want no one but me. I shall kill anyone who... because you... I saw my other self grasp her rudely with his hairy paws, tear the silk, put his teeth in her flesh. I remember exactly, his teeth. I do not remember how, but I-330 slipped away, and I saw her straightened, her head raised high, her eyes overlain by that cursed, impenetrable curtain. She stood leaning with her back against the closet door and listening to me. I remember I was on the floor. I embraced her limbs, kissed her knees, and cried supplicatingly. "At once! Right away! Right away!" Sharp teeth. The sharp, mocking triangle of the brows. She bent over and in silence unbuttoned my badge.
"Yes, yes, dear. Dear."
I began hastily to remove my unif, but I-330, silent as before, lifted my badge to my eyes, showing me the clock upon it. It was 22:25. I became cold. I knew what it meant to be out in the street after 22:30. My insanity disappeared at once. I was again I. I saw clearly one thing. I hated her. Hated her. Hated. Without saying goodbye, without looking back, I ran out of the room. Hurriedly trying to fasten the badge back in its place, I ran down the stairs. I was afraid lest someone notice me back in the elevator, and jumped out into a deserted street. Everything was in its place. Life so simple, ordinary, orderly. Glittering glass houses, pale glass sky, a greenish, motionless night. But under that cool glass, something wild, something red and hairy, was silently seething. I was gasping for breath, but I continued to run so as not to be late. Suddenly I felt that my badge, which I had hurriedly pinned on, was detaching itself. It came off and fell to the sidewalk. I bent over to pick it up, and in the momentary silence I heard someone's steps. I turned. Someone small and hunched was disappearing around the corner. At least, so it seemed. I started to run as fast as I could. The wind whistled in my ears. At the entrance of my house, I stopped and looked at the clock. 1 minute to 22:30. I listened. Nobody behind. It was my foolish imagination, the effect of that poison. The night was full of torture. My bed seemed to lift itself under me, then to fall again, then up again. I used autosuggestion. At night, all the numbers must sleep. Sleeping at night is a duty just like working during the day. To sleep at night is necessary for the next day's work. Not to sleep at night is criminal. Yet I could not sleep. I could not. I was perishing. I was unable to fulfill my duties to the United States.